Hey everybody, welcome to the briefing room on this Thursday. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Thank you for joining us here with our White House and investigative reporter, Catherine Faulders. Catherine, a big day today, the third day that the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, is up on Capitol Hill, this time behind closed doors. Many hours now. It's still going on. Of course, yesterday, all eyes were on the public hearing with Michael Cohen testifying, an extraordinary scene to take a step back. The longtime confidant, 10 years working for Donald Trump, and then to see this moment of Michael Cohen testifying, accusing President Trump of committing crimes while in office, also accusing him of being a liar, a racist, and a cheat. What reaction have you heard from the White House on this? You've been pretty plugged in over there. How are they seeing this, even as they come back now from Vietnam?
Yeah, well, look, multiple sources that I've spoken to haven't said too much yet, at least. I think they're still digesting it about the substance of Cohen's testimony. You saw that was hours of testimony. But what they do say is the president was frustrated. He was watching this testimony, at least parts of it, as he acknowledged.
Frustrated because it may be true, or frustrated because it's eclipsing his moment in the spotlight?
Well, frustrated. I think there's a little bit of both, but what I've heard from sources is that he's frustrated that it's eclipsing his moment in the spotlight. One source told me that the president thinks that the timing was hindering his negotiations with North Korea. So, of
course, those negotiations fell apart overnight.
Exactly.
So we didn't hear the president make that excuse, but perhaps he will fire a tweet.
Yeah, but it was interesting. He called John Carl called the hearing shameful and called it a fake hearing, but it's clear he was paying attention to the substance, because the part that he said that he thought Cohen didn't lie about was when Cohen said that there was no collusion with Russia. He didn't really say that. He said that he had no evidence to believe there was collusion with Russia, but that he was suspicious. So clearly the president was paying close attention.
And Democrats salivating by all the things that Michael Cohen had to say here. They are seeing a lot of different avenues for investigation. Republicans, meanwhile, today came out and largely brushed it off, painting Michael Cohen as a liar who, in fact, is going to federal prison next month for lying to Congress. Our Mary Bruce, senior congressional correspondent, caught up with some top Republicans a short time ago to ask them for their reaction to yesterday's hearing. Take a listen.
Republicans yesterday spent a lot of time attacking Cohen's credibility, but they didn't seem to spend a lot of time defending the president against Cohen's accusations. Did any of Cohen's claims about the president's wrongdoing or his alleged criminal activity give you cause for concern?
The Democrats wanted to have this hearing very early. Why? Because Cohen's going to jail. Why? For lying.
But when the fact that Cohen brings documentation, he says, look, you don't have to take him at his word. Look at the evidence that he says he's bringing. Does any of that give you pause about some of the allegations against the president?
From what I've seen and what we've investigated, it doesn't give me any pause whatsoever about this president.
Nothing that you heard from Cohen yesterday makes you question the president at all?
I didn't hear anything new in the process, no.
On the collusion question, I think he did not advance the cause at all of Trump campaign colluding with the Russians, so it seems to be that it sort of went the other way on that question. If you're looking for him to prove collusion, that didn't happen.
In Louisiana, we would call him a crook. He's an angry man. He's bitter. I'm not calling him a bunny boiler, but he's a little unbalanced. And I wouldn't take his check. And I don't think most Americans would either.
So both sides clearly retreating to their partisan corners here. You have Democrats arguing that Cohen's testimony was a game changer and that there need to be even more investigations and more hearings. While on the flip side, you have Republicans who say that Cohen is simply a liar and that essentially there is nothing to see here. The big remaining question is, what does the American public think? Does Cohen's testimony move the needle at all?
All right, important questions raised by our Mary Bruce there. Let's bring in our Ben Siegel now, Capitol Hill reporter who's been on the Cohen story, was in the hearing yesterday. Ben, help us break through some of this noise and spin on both sides. Democrats would have you believe this is all plain and clear evidence of criminality by the president. Republicans say it's absolutely nothing. It's simply bluster. In fact, more lies from Michael Cohen. Imagine the truth is somewhere in the middle. How do you parse that?
That's right, and I think Democrats will be the first ones to tell you that they were hearing many things yesterday that they want to follow up on, things that Michael Cohen said, things that he couldn't discuss even because there are still ongoing investigations. We spoke with Mr. Elijah Cummings today, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and he said basically everybody whose name came up in that hearing he wants to talk to. So there could be many more hearings like this, but at the very least, many more investigations stemming from yesterday.
Yeah, the striking thing yesterday, Catherine, was they named names. Michael Cohen was asked several times, give us specifically some individuals in Trump's orbit who we should follow up with. And he went there, and now some of those people could potentially be called to the Hill.
Yeah, exactly. You heard a number of names. You heard top executives at the Trump organization. Some names that we haven't heard of before. That was in a lot of lines of questioning from specifically the Democrats to Michael Cohen. So it will be interesting to see who comes in there next.
And a shocking reminder of the consequences of elections, by the way. If the Democrats had not won a majority in the House of Representatives in November in the midterm elections, we would not be here. We would not be having this hearing.
Exactly.
One of the freshman congressmen, men and women who won a seat in November, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. You know her quite well, have chased her around on the Hill, Catherine. She had quite a moment yesterday asking about the president's tax returns. Let's take a listen to that exchange.
To your knowledge, did the president ever provide inflated assets to an insurance company?
Yes.
Who else knows that the president did this?
Alan Weisselberg, Ron Lieberman, and Matthew Calamari.
So that was a striking exchange regarding the tax returns, but also an interesting moment with the president's tax returns in there. Cohen seemed to suggest that maybe President Trump might not be under audit. He says that he doesn't want to release his tax returns because he is under audit. But in another line of questioning about the tax returns, he says that he didn't want to become under audit. So I think that's another thing to watch for as it relates to the tax returns. There's a lot more reporting and information to be done there. The other thing, though, that I want to point out from Cohen's testimony that's striking is now that the Mueller investigation seems to be coming to an end, what we did learn, though, and I think what the president could potentially be more concerned about is this investigation in the Southern District of New York. We learned that it's expanding, that he's still cooperating with them, and that they're investigating other aspects of it as it relates to the president.
That was a fascinating admission on Michael Cohen's part, that he's been cooperating with these other federal prosecutors, aside from the special counsel, that there may be much more to come there. But want to go back to the tax returns. Michael Cohen told the panel yesterday he's one of the few people who has seen Donald Trump's tax returns. He looked at them. He said he hadn't gone through them, the thousands of pages. But Ben Siegel, you've been doing some reporting on what Democrats now intend to do to try to get their hands on those tax returns. And there are ways that the committees on Capitol Hill can actually do that. How does that work?
There are 3 committees up here who have the ability through a almost century-old law to request these returns from the IRS of any citizen. That includes the president. So the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Richard Neal, is studying that now. I spoke to him about yesterday's hearing. He said his staff was watching that, adjusting their paperwork accordingly, but they're going about this in a very methodical way because they expect the Trump administration and the Treasury to challenge this in court. So long story short, he is still trying to make sure all of his ducks are in a row to make sure they do this request the right way, despite that testimony and that exchange we heard yesterday from Cohen with some of the members of Congress. It sounds like they're just going to make sure they do this the right way.
All right, Ben Siegel, thanks so much for your reporting up on Capitol Hill. Everybody should follow Ben on Twitter. Thanks for that reporting, Ben. And the president, Catherine, just before flying back, he's still in the air right now, to join Base Andrews, was asked by our Jonathan Karl, chief White House correspondent, what he thinks of President Cohen, or Michael Cohen's testimony. And here's a little bit of what the president had to say about the testimony he caught on TV from Vietnam.
While this was going on, the drama back in Washington, your former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who worked for you for 10 years, his office right next to yours, right by yours at Trump Tower, he called you a liar, a con man, a racist. What's your response to Michael Cohen?
Well, it's incorrect. He lied a lot, but it was very interesting because he didn't lie about one thing. He said no collusion with the Russian hoax. And I said, I wonder why he didn't just lie about that, too, like he did about everything else. I mean, he lied about so many different things. And I was actually impressed that he didn't say, well, I think there was collusion for this reason or that. He didn't say that. He said no collusion. And I was, a little impressed by that, frankly. He could have gone all out. He only won about 95% instead of 100%.
Yeah, so shameful fake hearing. And as we were talking a little bit about earlier, of course, the president and his allies on Capitol Hill are capitalizing on that narrative that Michael Cohen said that there was no collusion.
It was a striking point. Not that Michael Cohen would have had complete visibility over the campaign.
To which he said he had no evidence.
Exactly, but certainly helped the president's case in that matter.
Yeah, exactly. And he said he had suspicions as well. But again, that's not
to be continued. And of course, those hearings with Michael Cohen are continuing right now behind closed doors, so much more reporting to come. Meanwhile, as we said, the president leaving Vietnam empty-handed, leaving Kim Jong-un behind without a deal, a nuclear deal. They had, these were the pictures that came in overnight of that historic second summit between the president of the United States, the leader of North Korea. One of the questions, Catherine, despite the headline of not having a deal here, was about the way Kim Jong-un has treated Americans in his custody. And of course, everybody remembers the case of the American college student Otto Warmbier, who President Trump upheld as an example of Kim's brutality, invited the family to the State of the Union. There we see a picture of Otto, died shortly after being released from North Korean custody. I was shocked to hear the president basically absolve Kim for any responsibility in Otto's death.
This was absolutely striking. He said that Kim Jong-un told him that he didn't know about this, that he didn't have anything to do with it, and the president took his word for it.
And we have a little bit of that sound. Let's listen to President Trump speaking and sort of raising eyebrows about his thoughts on Kim Jong-un's role in Otto Warmbier's death.
I really believe something very bad happened to him, and I don't think that the top leadership knew about it. I did speak about it, and I don't believe that he would have allowed that to happen. It just wasn't to his advantage to allow that to happen. But I really don't believe that he was, I don't believe he knew about it.
A pattern of taking dictators at their word. Of course, you remember he did that with Vladimir Putin, denying any involvement in the U.S. elections, of course, as one example. You've been in touch with the Warmbier family's attorney. What are they reacting to?
Yeah, I have, and it's unlikely we're going to hear anything from the family. The attorney says, quote, I don't think they're going to have anything to say about it. That's, all we have from them right now. But you remember they sued North Korea for $1 billion. The court ended up awarding the family $500 million. And I think the other thing to point out here is that, we talk about Russia and our intelligence communities and their conclusions. Well, U.S. officials have publicly said that North Korea is responsible for this. So it's also the president not believing our own intel community once again.
Right, and certainly a tragic story as the president calls Kim Jong-un his friend, a constructive relationship, but again, coming back without a deal. Let's talk a little bit more now about that stalemate in Korea. No roadmap forward today with our Joo-hee Cho. She's the Asian correspondent for ABC News, is in Hanoi now, joins us live. Joo-hee, North Korea, in fact, just minutes ago, coming out forcefully disputing the president's characterization of what went down in that room. What can you tell us about their response?
Well, that call for a press conference at midnight was a surprise. Today was a series of surprises. First, Kim Jong-un answering questions answering questions from reporters. And then also he was talking a little bit about how he does not have much time during the photo op before he went into the bilateral meeting. Now, the Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho and their Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-yi, they came out at midnight, invited a couple of reporters and said North Korea had proposed the maximum they could give up. He said, permanently, completely dismantling all nuclear material production facilities in the Yongbyon area. They said that includes plutonium and uranium, and in the presence of U.S. experts. But during the meeting, he said the U.S. insisted one more step to be taken. Now, this coincides with what President Trump had explained about a new facility that he thought surprised the North Koreans. And then in return, North Korea said they asked for parts of the UN sanctions resolutions to be removed, only the ones that impede the livelihood of their people. Now, this contradicts exactly what Trump said earlier. He said basically North Korea wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety. So yes, there is contradiction and there's a lot to work out.
Certainly an incredible admission on the North Koreans' part, as you said, Joo-hee, that perhaps they've lost the will to continue in these negotiations. There are no future talks settled, which sort of surprised me. You were there watching the body language and listening closely overnight to all the things both of these men said. Things were proceeding quite nicely. They were dining on steak, chocolate lava cake. They were set to have a grand lunch, talked about their great friendship together. But the rhetoric aside, you were perhaps clued into some of the body language that could have signaled some of this wasn't going so well.
The first sign that I saw today was when President Trump was talking at the photo opportunity. He was, praising Kim Jong-un and congratulating him for not firing missiles or testing missiles. Kim Jong-un nodded constantly as if he understood what President Trump was saying, even before the translator translated that into English. So obviously we learned that Kim Jong-un does understand English to a certain extent. And then when President Trump started talking about we're in no rush, that no rush comment that he had repeatedly repeated in the past couple of days, Kim Jong-un stopped and he just frowned. His facial expression totally changed. And then he turned over to his translator and he said, "But we have no time. The time is very important to us." But he kind of ended that sentence and then he went on to another topic. So we sensed that Kim Jong-un was anxious and he wanted to get a deal done because for him, he needs to think about his domestic people. He left North Korea in glory. They celebrated. They all thought that Kim Jong-un was on this great journey for 66 hours to bring a big present back home, meaning sanctions lifted that will make their lives easier. But obviously, he's going back home empty-handed, and North Koreans are not happy.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and we shall see if that domestic pressure in any way brings Kim Jong-un back to the table. Perhaps this is to be continued. Joo-hee Cho, thanks so much for your reporting today. And overnight, you were on with us here on ABC News Live with great reporting from Hanoi. Thank you, Joo-hee. Meanwhile, Congress here in Washington closely watching all the developments overseas, also taking some action on a couple of pretty significant pieces of legislation that may not be on your radar. In fact, for the first time in 25 years, the House of Representatives passed a major piece of gun control legislation. This was a background check bill that they passed last night, requiring background checks on all firearms sales and transfers nationwide. A very significant piece of legislation that had long been called for by the March for Our Lives students and the one-year anniversary of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school shooting, one of the deadliest school shootings in American history, just about a year ago down in Florida. And we see some of those advocates here. A big win for them. Pretty slim chances over in the Senate, the Republican-controlled Senate, but nonetheless a significant milestone worth mentioning. Meanwhile, the Democrats in majority in the House also taking a look at other priorities, including marijuana, of all things. Our Mary Alice Parks has been up on Capitol Hill today tracking a new bill that was just unveiled to legalize marijuana nationwide. Mary Alice, tell us about this piece of legislation that's up today.
Yeah, this is pretty dramatic legislation. It would legalize marijuana at the federal level, like you said, and also expunge records of previous convictions. So someone who served time for marijuana possession or use in the past, well, they would have their record cleared. And someone who's in jail currently on a marijuana-related charge, they could have reason to bring that case up to a judge. So really huge, sweeping legislation. I was struck by the fact that there are already 30 co-sponsors in the House, and in the Senate, 5 senators who are running for president, well, they signed on board to this legislation as well. I talked to Congresswoman Barbara Lee from California. She was one of the authors of the House version of the bill, of this new legislation. I talked to her just a few minutes ago about the prospects, whether it has any chance of passing. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
Congresswoman, thank you for doing this and for talking to us about the Marijuana Justice Act. Your staff, just a few minutes ago, was telling us that there are almost twice as many co-sponsors this go around. Is this an increasingly popular idea in the Democratic Party?
Absolutely, and I think it's because of the people around the country who have said that our marijuana laws are unjust, they're unfair, they really need to be reformed. We have over 30-some states that have either legalized, decriminalized, or passed medical marijuana initiatives on the ballot. So it's time. So I was very proud to introduce the bill today, yes, with 30 co-sponsors. And Congressman Ro Khanna, of course, is a principal co-sponsor, and then Senator Booker in the Senate has introduced the Senate bill with, I believe, 7 co-sponsors.
What is your line going to be to those Democrats that say this is too much, this is too radical?
Well, it's really not radical. I mean, racial injustice, that's pretty radical in a country that believes in liberty and justice for all and criminal justice reform. It's not radical. I mean, when you look at the fact that more than 3 times the number of African Americans have been incarcerated than white people as a result of marijuana charges, I mean, that's outrageous. And so mass incarceration is radical, it's wrong. So we're trying to repair the damage of the criminal justice system and also move forward to make sure that those who were affected by these unjust laws receive some justice. And in the bill, we expunge the records of all misdemeanor marijuana charges.
I noticed that of those co-sponsors in the Senate, 5, including Cory Booker, are running for president. So it seems as though they are ready to take this argument about federally legalizing marijuana to the national stage, to the presidential campaign. Do you think this should be a new litmus test for presidential candidates?
I'm not really for litmus tests, but I'm for people being educated and informed and really understanding what an agenda for the people really means. And part of that agenda is racial justice and criminal justice reform. And so I'm really delighted that they have embraced this, and we'll be talking about it and debating it and making sure we build the critical mass so we can get it passed and signed into law.
Okay, so what does come next? Are there going to be hearings in the House?
Let's hope so. We're working because we now, as Democrats in the House at least, we are in the majority. And so I'm working to get co-sponsors. Congressman Khanna is working to get co-sponsors. And so we're going to build support. And again, this goes back to the people. It's going to be the power of the people, the voices of the people, to make sure their members of Congress sign on to the bill.
All right. Well, Congresswoman, thank you again. Congratulations on your bill today. Seems like it can make a lot of headlines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really excited.
You can imagine that those presidential candidates are going to get a lot of questions about signing on to this legislation.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, Mary Allison. As you pointed out, a couple of presidential candidates opposing it. Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota not signing on there, Sherrod Brown of Ohio as well. But pretty fascinating that she frames it as something of racial justice and all those criminal convictions that would presumably be expunged by this bill.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And speaking of the presidential race, there's 2 possible contenders that I think of on this topic as well. There's been a lot of buzz and rumors about Washington's governor, Jay Inslee. He told CBS just last week that he was going to make an announcement in the coming weeks. Obviously, marijuana is legal in Washington state. And then Colorado's former governor, Hickenlooper. He has been campaigning. He was in Iowa. I guess not formally campaigning yet. He hasn't announced, but he's been traveling to those early states. So you have governors from Washington and Colorado, these 2 states where marijuana is already legal, bringing their message to the national stage as well.
And former Congressman Beto O'Rourke of Texas also on that train and rumored to be close to a decision. I guess he said he's made one. He's about to tell us about it soon. So a lot of intense speculation about when more Democrats will get into the race. Mary Alice, thank you so much for that reporting. Deputy Political Director up on Capitol Hill. And we will be tracking those new Democrats, presumed new Democrats in the presidential race coming soon. The field is getting more crowded. Great to have you with us here today in the briefing room. I'm Devin Dwyer. Hope you download the ABC News app. We'll be back here tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Time. Hope to see you then.